Welcome to the Mio on MMA podcast. Enough of my bad singing. We have UFC St. Louis, which is for a travel card, a mixed bag. So here's what I like about the card. I really like the undercard. I like the non-main card portion, which I'm not really sure is what you should be aiming for, but whether it's Veronica Hardy versus JJ Aldridge, Jared Gooden versus Kevin Doucette, Jake Hadley versus Charles Johnson, Trey Waters versus Billy Goff, Tabitha Ricci versus Tisha Torres. Why is that not on the main card? Terrence McKinney versus Esteban Ribovic, Chase Hooper. Well, okay, not so much Chase Hooper versus Borshow. Pardon me. That's more your standard two true outcome fights. It's a little bit dull, but everything else has a very legitimate point to what it's trying to do, and it's probably going to be fairly entertaining. So that's cool. But the main card with Waldo Cortez Acosta versus Robelis de Spain, okay, fine, that's a freak show, that's fun. Alex Caceres, Sean Woodson is just kind of a fight. There's just like things I would infinitely prefer Alex Caceres to be doing. Carlos Diego Ferreira versus Mateusz Rebeski could be good. I actually have like a really high ceiling for it, but there's also a really low ceiling for it. And then you got Menefield versus Alberg. That's pretty fun. But then the co-main event is Buckley versus Nursultan Ruziboev. And I guess your mileage may vary. If you think Ruziboev is a good fighter, a very good fighter, I guess you like this fight. I just don't. And then the main event of Derek Lewis versus Rodrigo Nascimento is just bad matchmaking. If you're going to put Derek Lewis out there, give him someone like Jairzinho Rosenstruck to just bang with. I legitimately have no idea why Derek Lewis versus Jairzinho Rosenstruck has not happened. I'm wondering if it's not even been booked at any point. So, like, that's confusing. Like, the best fights on the planet for Derek Lewis are just guys who are going to just bang with him. Guys like Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Guys like Sergey Pavlovich, even though it was a 55-second fight. Guys like Tai Tuivasa, great fight, fantastic fight. Chris Daukaus, fantastic fight. All 3.5 minutes of it. But, for heavyweight standards, that's what we got. This feels a lot more like the Jelton Almeida, the Sergey Spivak, the going way back in time. Something like the Alexei Olenek fight, which was sloppy fun, I guess, or Blago Ivanov. Actually, that's the one. Blago Ivanov does feel like absolutely like the fight that this one represents most closely. It's just, I don't know, it's just not really a fun time. I am going to be talking about betting on this card because I always do, because it's kind of a thing. Talking about betting is kind of a thing I do. And I will get out of the way right now the spiel of do not bet on MMA, which you cannot lose. Because I'm going to be talking about betting on this card. This is a card I'm going to be betting on quite a bit because there are a lot of live dogs. But remember that. Be within your limits. This is not a pathway to financial freedom, which I was arguing with somebody on Twitter a little while ago about that. Don't do that. All right, let's get on to the card here. Derek Lewis, Rodrigo Nascimento, main event. I told you this kind of reminds me of the Blago Ivanov fight. It's not a complex fight. Lewis has the knockout power to be entertaining and fun. He's not really a good striker. That's the thing that's always been kind of weird is that, realistically speaking, against people who can take his power and can break it down, he tends to lose. And obviously, he actually is a pretty good counter wrestler just because of his power and strength. But he's not really a good grappler. Nascimento has definitely got a pathway to victory here. He can grind. He is a guy who does strike okay. He does clinch okay. He kind of does a little bit of everything. He is the jack of all trades, master of none heavyweight version where through a fairly decent impressive durability, he's been able to put together a pretty good run here in the UFC. Way better than I expected, honestly. When he debuted in the UFC, it was The Dontel Mays fight, which he won, and I was surprised. And then he lost to Chris Daukaus, and I'm like, all right, this is kind of returned to normal. And then he had a really competitive fight with Alan Badeau. But then he put together a 3-fight win streak with over Tanner Boser, Ilar Latifi, and then beating Dontel Mays again. By the way, rematches that didn't need to happen for 500, please. I am going to take Derek Lewis, though, because we have seen Nascimento get knocked out by Chris Daukaus. He's not a really good wrestler. He's just kind of a grinder. There are people he has completely failed to take down. I don't think he took down Dontel Mays in their second fight. Like, that would be a great example. He had no takedowns in that fight. Now, the threat of the takedowns, the pressure, the clinching, the grinding, these were all part of the victory, obviously. It wasn't just a straight-up striking affair, but it did prove that he, could win when denied that access. But I just think he gets clubbed at some point. Like, Derek Lewis hits really hard. And this is a 5-round fight against Nascimento, who is a guy that does not really finish. Like, I talked about that win streak, but they are all fights that went the distance. Unanimous decision against Dontel Mays, splits against Latifi, split against Boser, and the only guy he's finished in the UFC is that first fight with Dontel Mays where he ran naked choked him. Even on the regional scene, it's not great. Also, like, the regional talent he faced, like, there is one guy who has a record. That's Everton Dos Santos, who was 4-1. Aside from that, it's all like a bunch of 1-1 guys and a 1-4 dude. And they were able to take his best shots. Derek Lewis is weirdly durable in the sense that he is generally kind of hard to finish, but if you really, really hit his body, he'll kind of fold. But that's not really Nascimento's game. I mean, I would hope that we see some body work here just because it's something you should just do against Derek Lewis, even if it's not part of your regular game. But 5 rounds of just grinding on Derek Lewis, maybe this is just my, I really don't want to see it angle, but I am going to pick Derek Lewis by knockout. He is the favorite, minus 145 to minus 172. Nascimento coming back at plus 125 to plus 136. We move on to Joaquin Buckley versus Nursultan Ruziboa. By the way, this is a weird card. There are two 6'5" welterweights on this card in Ruziboa and Trey Waters. That is weird. That is stunning. That has to be the first time that's ever happened. 2 is not a large number in most circumstances. In this circumstance, it is. I am taking Buckley by decision. Here's why I'm taking this. I've never really been a believer in Ruziboa. He wins a lot of fights in non-replicatable manners, like picking up just power subs from bottom and stuff. For example, picking up random kind of, I don't want to say lucky knockout, because he's trying, he's doing what he's trying to do. But a lot of his knockouts just kind of come out of nowhere, and there's not really a lot of setup, and it just leaves you to believe that a guy with an actual striking game is not going to get caught by his BS. And that beating Cedricus Dumas and Bruno Ferreira, 2 very, 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 very flawed fighters, doesn't really convince me otherwise. Dumas because he's incredibly raw, and Ferreira because he's dumb. I don't mean in an IQ sense, but I mean in a fight Q sense. Bruno Ferreira is pretty dumb. So we end up with him fighting Buckley here, who I don't think super highly of, but he is a phenomenal athlete for the division. He is stunningly creative and stunningly decent at applying his relatively shallow game plan or skill set to a game plan that can win the fight. He can wrestle. He can strike. He can do random stuff. He does seem to have a very good chin. So he's probably not just going to get nuked out of existence. He is a far better fighter than anything Ruziboa has beaten, and a far better fighter than a lot of the guys that have beaten Ruziboa. So that's where I'm going. I'm picking Buckley to be reasonably well prepared, durable enough that random stuff doesn't happen. Probably a guy who's not going to fall victim to a bottom power submission. That would be nice. And despite the 7-foot, the 7-inch, 7-foot, no, 7-inch height advantage, 5'10" versus 6'5", there is actually a 76-inch reach going both ways. Like I want to say there are people that Buckley has fought that have longer reaches than Ruzi Boev, which is a bit weird because he's used to being the shorter guy. Like Vicente Luque has the same reach as Ruzi Boev, for example. Nasruddin Imavov. Imavov has a shorter reach, but it's like very, very comparable. He's 6'3". Yes, Imavov won that fight, but that was a controversial decision at the same time. And even going back to Impa Kasanganai has like a 75-inch reach. So the idea that the simple height and reach is going to be too awkward, too weird for Buckley seems kind of unlikely because he's fought guys with similar reaches before. He's never fought a guy who's 6'5", or at least if he is 6'5", it's like one of those like really, really early fights with a fighter with a very incomplete profile. So there is that chance. There is always going to be that chance whenever Ruzi Boev fights somebody that he's just the tallest guy they've ever fought. And it's going to be weird. But I have faith in Buckley. It's not a confident pick, and the odds will back me up on this one because Buckley is a -135 to -165 favorite. And on the other end, Ruzi Boev is +112 to +140. It's one of the tightest lines on the card. I want to say that it is the tightest line on the card. Chase Hooper versus Slava Claus is very, very similar, as is Terrence McKinney versus Esteban Rubovic. No, Ricci versus Torres/Pennington is a closer line. But that is... And Aldrich versus Hardy. So the women's fights are closer. But of the men, Buckley is the smallest favorite of everyone who is a favorite. But I am taking him to win the fight. I can picture what a Ruzi Boev win looks like. I can see that in my brain. I can conceptualize that. But it's very random, chaotic, and not repeatable. So that's why I don't want to pick it. Alonzo Menaville versus Carlos Ulberg. I'm taking Carlos Ulberg by decision. Essentially, this just boils down to this. Ulberg is the better technician. Menaville is a fantastic athlete. Fantastic. But kind of like Buckley, there is a lot of like physicality is doing the work for him. If you look at his opponents, yeah, there's that win over Dustin Jacoby, and that's great. That's a fantastic victory. But a lot of the other people he fought are guys who just are not very good strikers, and therefore hitting really, really hard and being athletic is the victory. Like, the guy is on a 5-fight unbeaten streak. But outside of Jacoby, it's Jimmy Crute, Misha Serkinov, and Askar Mozarov, a guy so fraudulent that it was a big deal that he was having wins removed from his record and losses added. And then you got to go back to the William Knight fight. And then, like, before that, it's Ed Herman, Fabio Charant, lost to OSB, lost to Devin Clark, beat Paul Craig, beat Vinicius Moraia, and then we're back on the regional scene with a bunch of guys that you probably don't know. And I say that because I don't really know them. I saw his fight with Deshaun Boatwright. I was not impressed with Boatwright. It was an 8-second fight. What are you going to do? And then if you look at the guys before that, it's 4-4, 9-4, 5-2 Daniel Jolly on the Contender Series, which was a doctor stoppage. Daniel Jolly's like an okay physical athlete, but like a guy who never picked up any kind of like striking feel. So could Benefield be super dangerous here and just get the knockout? Absolutely. That's on the table. That's always on the table with him. He is that kind of power puncher. He is that kind of physical specimen. But Ulberg is himself a very, very good athlete by the divisional standards, by MMA standards, and he is taller, a little bit longer and just a better striker with a better camp. He is a city kickboxing guy. I have no idea where Menifield's training. He's listed as being out of some Muay Thai gym. I have to imagine that something else is there. And I don't think that Menifield's wrestling game, which is probably the better of the two, even though it's very, very brute force, really comes into play. I think this is going to be more or less a kickboxing bout. And until you get to the very top of the division, I tend to think Allberg will win those. He's not unflappable. He's got some defensive issues. It's very, very clear that I don't really think Allberg is fighting guys who really have the reach and the athletic ability to be on parity with him in the gym. Those are hard to find. And as a result, I think his defense is a little bit undercooked, but it's not that bad. And Menifield's offense is not slick. It's not subtle. It's very much a hammer. So I'm going to go with Allberg. He is a minus 200 to minus 290 favorite. Menifield's plus 205 to plus 220. I probably won't bet on this fight. I don't feel great about Menifield, but like he's far too dangerous for me to be betting on at like minus 300 or against on like minus 300 odds. In fact, I don't think I'm betting on any of these first three fights. I will be betting on the fourth one. Carlos Diego Ferreira, CDF versus Mateusz Rombetsky. In his prime, I would take Carlos Diego Ferreira in an absolute heartbeat. And I'm still going to here, but like I am going to do it with the absolute caveat that he is 39 years old. And that's a problem. But I think he still has a lot of his physical explosiveness, his dynamicism. That knockout against Michael Johnson, I think, was a great example of that. Rombetsky is not a good boxer. His striking game is very much just low kicks. And being an absolute bowling ball that can generally bully people in the clinch, take them down, and get on top of them and kind of destroy them. It reminds me of like very much a Polish version of Michel. Was it Prazeres? I think it was Michel Prazeres, the guy who was like 5'6" and had a hard time making lightweight. That's Rombetsky, who's 5'7". It's just that Carlos Diego Ferreira is a really good grappler. Like this is a world-class grappler. Unless you're Beneil Dariush, tangling with this guy in a submission grappling setting in MMA is a bad idea. And that's just kind of the thing is I think matchup-wise, Rombetsky, who I do think has a hard time keeping his pace up, is going to go out there and at some point just kind of fall into grappling exchanges with CDF. And I have no doubt he will have some success because he is like I said, bowling ball. But can he do it for 3 rounds without getting in trouble at some point? And can his lack of boxing defense hold up for 3 rounds without getting clipped? And I don't think so. Again, I could regret this pick immediately when Ferreira comes out and just looks like an old man. Like that is on the table. That is absolutely at play. And I tried to convince myself to go with Rombetsky. I tried to dissuade myself, particularly when I saw that like Ferreira's a plus 285 to plus 320 underdog. I'm like, people are seeing something I'm not. People know. People feel it, but I can't help it because as much as Carlos Diego Ferreira's run as of late has not been very good. Before he knocked out Michael Johnson, he was on a 3-fight losing streak. But that 3-fight losing streak was to Beneil Dariush, Gregor Gillespie, and Mateusz Gamrot. That is an insanely good list. And his only other losses are to Dustin Poirier and Beneil Dariush again. That's an incredibly elite group that I can't pick Rombetsky to join. I could absolutely see it. It's the age. It's picking anyone at 39 outside of like heavyweight is never comfortable. But I cannot dissuade myself that the better boxer and the better grappler on paper gets this job done. Could be wrong. But I'm going with it. I gave you Fajea's odds. Rumbeski is minus 395 to minus 420. Blaze it. I will be betting on the underdog. Alex Caceres versus Sean Woodson. It's a fight that I have a hard time getting actually excited for because Woodson is a fighter that I constantly think is going to lose, and then he doesn't. I picked Charles Jourdain to beat him. I picked Yusuf Zalal to beat him. I think I may have even picked Kyle Bochniak to beat him. I understand the difficulty of fighting him. He's 6'2", 78 inches. For comparison purposes, he has a longer reach than Ruzi Boev. And he is 2 weight classes lower, 3 weight classes lower if we really look at what Ruzi Boev usually fights at. By the way, Ruzi Boev has made 170 before. So actually, I assume, despite the 6'5" frame, that he can do it. I understand it. Woodson is a fairly competent boxer, has a good range, ability to figure out range and so on. Big reach, big height. I understand it. I just don't like it. I think the thing that always sets me off is that he looks like an absolute skeleton. Like it looks like he's cutting too much weight, and he has no lower body whatsoever. That feels exploitable. That feels like you should be able to low kick that. That feels like you should be able to wrestle that. That feels like it feels like that should be abusable. And then on the other hand, you have Alex Caceres, who I've never been able to get really excited for because he doesn't fight to win. He's a guy who stands and bangs with Yair Rodriguez. It has a very Yair Rodriguez fight with Yair Rodriguez. He goes to the ground with Kron Gracie. He never fights to a game. Well, I don't want to say never because there are examples of him doing it, but there are often times where he does not fight to a winning condition, and that always worries me. But I have to go with Caceres. I've never had faith in Sean Woodson. I still don't. Caceres should, I think, be able to deal with the fact that he's fighting a taller guy. It hasn't really been the defining factor of his struggles before. He is, I think, the better, well-rounded fighter in the sense that Woodson is kind of just a boxer. It's very one-dimensional. And at 145, particularly a good weight class, that shouldn't work. We'll see. We'll see if Caceres does any grappling with him. We'll see if Caceres kicks the legs. We'll see if Caceres works the body because, again, there's not much to his body. It feels like that should be really, really easy to hit him. Not hit him. Hurt him there if you can hit him. So I've got Caceres by decision. It's a stretch. It's another underdog pick. He's plus 160 to plus 180. Woodson's minus 195 to minus 218. It's a underdog that I don't have a lot of faith in. I wouldn't bet on him if I were you, but I probably will bet him. It's one of those things where if you do not think he's winning, you definitely should not bet on him. But I do, so I'm stuck with it. Waldo Cortez Acosta versus Robelis Despain is just simply, does this fight go long? Because Despain has one fight that has gone over a minute. That's it. One fight. He's very powerful. He's 6'7". He has an 87-inch reach. He is a huge man who hits very, very hard, has a Taekwondo background, probably has the athletic ability to have actually done a real sport at some point in his life if he had been American. And Waldo Cortez Acosta is a guy who definitely has a little bit of toughness and can go 15 minutes, but is not very good. He's athletic enough that it just doesn't really matter, but nothing about his game is very good. We have a meme fighter versus a salsa dancer. This is great. I know I sound kind of dismissive because I'm dismissive of what these two guys could actually do in the heavyweight division, but at the bottom of heavyweight, they are super fun. So I'm going with Despain to get a TKO, but if this goes beyond a minute, if this goes out of the first round, his chances of winning are going to go down because as limited as Waldo Cortez Acosta is, he has 15 minutes of fighting in him. I'm not convinced that Despain has more than 2. Despain is the favorite, minus 200 to minus 265. Cortez Acosta is plus 168 to plus 200. Would have been really cool if it was minus 205 to minus 265, literally the heavyweight margins. Chase Hooper versus Slaviklaj Vyacheslav Borsho. Two true outcome fight. You have the grappler, Hooper, not a good striker, makes up for it with being aggressive and tries to overwhelm with volume, but not a good striker, not a good wrestler, not a particularly good athlete. Borsho, better athlete, pretty good striker, not necessarily a good grappler, and despite working with Team Alpha Male, not actually that great of a takedown defender. That being said, guys like Mike Davis and Mark Diakese are the guys who have had a lot of success. Nazim Sadikov as well. They are better wrestlers and way more physical than Chase Hooper. So at the end of the day, I got to go with Borsho. The fight starts on the feet. It's a two true outcome. If it goes to the ground, Hooper's going to win. If it stays standing, Borsho's going to win. That's all there is to it. I've got Borsho. I've got him by TKO. Hooper is tough, but his defense is quite poor. He's very, very hittable, and at some point, getting hit at a hard pace by a decently hard-hitting lightweight should force the referee to step in and stop the fight. There you go. Borsho is minus 135 to minus 154. Hooper plus 115 to plus 125. There is value in Hooper. I will say that because if he can get it down, there is a massive gulf between his grappling and Borsho's. I just don't think he gets it there. And I don't think he can keep it there. I foresee a takedown at some point. I just think that Borsho, who's not a bad scrambler, I mean, he's Team Alpha Male again, like not a bad scrambler, probably gets back to his feet. Terrence McKinney versus Esteban Ribovic. This is kind of like Despain versus Waldo Cortez Acosta at lightweight, where you have McKinney, very good wrestler, very good athlete, not a good striker, but an overwhelming one because he swings for the fences and has the speed, has the explosiveness, has the power to put you away, versus Ribovic, who is not very good at anything, but he is tough. Can he make it out of the first round? Because that is the standard Terrence McKinney question. I'm going to say McKinney by TKO, but I would not be surprised if Ribovic just rides the wave, gets to round two, and then does what everyone else does, which is take apart a rather exhausted, very open to getting hit, very defensively porous Terrence McKinney. There you go. Ribovic is a minus 155 to minus 178 favorite. McKinney is plus 130 to plus 138. I'm going with the underdog. I'm rocking the underdog. That is, I think, the only way to bet there. Tabitha Ricci versus Tisha Torres, who will probably be announced as Tisha Pennington and probably will have to be Pennington. I'm saying Torres right now just because my notes are written that way before I looked at the UFC website and it started putting Pennington out there. So there you go. It's the atomweight title fight. I've been saying that these two would fight each other in atomweight title fight for like a long time. Ricci I know can make atomweight. Torres I just assume can at 5'1" that she can do it. Like she has been at a physical size disadvantage her entire career. And Ricci at strawweight is the same. I'm going with Torres. Now, I am concerned. Torres is coming off having a baby. She's not 32 anymore. She's 34 now. There's a big difference there. But she has never been easy to take down. Never, ever been easy to take down. Never been easy to control. It can be done. She, does have that loss to Ronda Marcos on Tough. She does have a loss to Mackenzie Dern, although it involved actually very, very little takedowns. Dern is not credited with having a single successful takedown in that fight, which is kind of weird. But we have seen Brianna Fortuno took her down, even though she lost. Rose Namajunas, looking down here, Jessica Andrade had 10 takedowns. She is the only person to have more than 2, though. So Torres, the better striker. Ricci is a willing and capable striker. She's not bad, but she is predominantly a grappler. And when she's been shut out of the grappling game at any point in her career, she has not won. So Torres, I think, can do that, or at least be incredibly difficult. I mean, this could be a case of like the Borsho Hooper fight where you do get her down, but you can't keep her down because Torres is a good scrambler, is hard to control, etc., etc., etc. So as long as Torres is not faded, is not reduced by the time away, by motherhood, Motherhood hasn't usually been a problem, but I mean, I don't know. We don't really have a lot of data on this. Don't have a tremendous correlation of data. I have to go with her. She is the underdog too, which actually sweetens the pot for me. Plus 110 to plus 124, reaching at minus 130 to minus 150. Now, I will say, disclaimer, I have had a really, really terrible time picking Tabitha Ricci fights. If you look at her UFC run, I picked against her with Furo, which was right. I think I picked Maria Oliveira to beat her. I think I beat Polyana Viana to beat her. I think I picked Jessica and Jillian Robertson to beat her. And then I was right with Godita. So I don't think I picked her a single time. And she's 4-2. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. My record on Ricci fights is 2-4. But I do think that stylistically, this is a fight that Tisha Torres, at relatively size parity, should actually win. That's my takeaway. Trey Waters versus Billy Goff. This is a fun fight, but I'm not going to describe it like particularly in rosy language because Waters is a 6'5", 77-inch reach welterweight, which is huge. But that's kind of all that's really notable about him. Like, he has a boxing game, he has a kicking game, he has a game. But it is a game that really is only functional because of how big he is. Like, that's the thing. His awkwardness and the fact that people get in the cage with him and they're, you're fighting someone that tall. There's a certain, what did I get myself into factor to it. And nothing is very deep. Nothing is very great. It's very, very raw. It's just very, very awkward. Billy Goff is a fun action fighter. He fights at a high pace. He predominantly bangs, goes for knockouts, but I'm not convinced he actually has great power because his most notable win is, I can never say his name right. I swear I have it written down. Yeah. Yusaku Kinoshita. That is his big win. Kinoshita got knocked out by Adam Fugan. So I'm forgive me for not being super convinced that he actually has knockout power. He's undersized for 170. He does not have a very good game. He is very, very hittable. He is facing a 7-inch height disadvantage and a 4.5-inch reach disadvantage. He is not a big, powerful wrestler. He is not a big, powerful fighter. I'm going with Trey Waters by TKO. Goff is super tough. That being said, he is very, very open to face checking just about anything. So, Trey Waters, TKO. He's the minus 157 to minus 170 favorite. Goff is plus 125 to plus 136. Might put Waters into parlay. Jake Hadley versus Charles Johnson. Another underdog I'm picking is Charles Johnson. This is kind of, it's kind of actually really, really similar to the Tabitha Ricci versus Tisha Torres fight. Now that I think about it, really just kind of hit me. Charles Johnson is hard to take down. He's a pretty good boxer. He's hard to take down. And a lot of Jake Hadley's game functions basically off the takedown. He can strike. He can box. He can low kick. He can do these things. But if you look at Hadley's record, there is really no example of him being denied a wrestling game and actually winning. With one exception, which is the Carlos Candelario fight where Candelario took him down and got triangled. That is the exception. Well, there's Malcolm Gordon, but that's Malcolm Gordon who was literally pissing out parts of his kidneys or liver. I forget which it was now. It was bad. It was one of the scariest weight cuts you're ever going to hear a story about. So, Charles Johnson, give him the counter wrestling, give him the better boxing edge. It's not going to be comfortable. It never is. Charles Johnson never wins a fight comfortably because the guy has, I need to look this up, he has 3 UFC wins, all of which, well, two of which you can totally score against him, and I am not going to argue. Azat Maxim and Jean-Luc Shumagulov. Probably should watch that Maxim fight again. Apparently outlanded him 2-1. Maybe I would doubt that. But the Shumagulov fight, which he totally could have lost. And then, he finished Jimmy Flick, which is whatever. But then, very, very close fights with Cody Durden, which was defined by takedowns, 11 of them. But Cody Durden proved that he was a better wrestler than Jake Hadley when they fought each other. So, there you go. And then surprisingly, Ode Osborne had success against him at the takedowns. I just assumed that he wasn't really ready for them, I guess. I don't know. Kind of, I do kind of hope that Hadley wins. I kind of hope to be wrong. Johnson is 33, presumably nearing the end of his run at flyweight, and has not made a lot of the steps I wanted to see him make at some point. I've just given up on him getting better. Whereas Hadley, 27, maybe he can get better. Maybe he gets new ideas from coaching, becomes better, more diverse. But I do have to see it before I pick it. So, like I said, Johnson is a plus 122 to plus 136 underdog. Hadley minus 145 to minus 174. Jared Gooden versus Kevin Doucette. I'm taking Kevin Doucette by decision pretty easily here. Jared Gooden is a guy that I didn't think would win UFC fights. Now, he has against Wellington Turman and Nicholas Stolze. Nicholas Stolze is bad. Very bad. And Wellington Turman is a very uncomfortable striker. My frustration with Jared Gooden is that he kind of is a pocket boxer who does not push pace on people. It's kind of similar to Charles Johnson's problem, actually, just without the frame, I guess. You know, Johnson is like a pretty good athlete, pretty big guy for the weight class. Gooden is perfectly well sized, 6 feet tall, 77 inches. Like, he's not small, but he's not big. And the problem there is that, like, he doesn't push the pace up. He has great pace. Randy Brown and Alan Jouban, highly high-paced performances, but they were driving it. They were bringing it out of him. He doesn't bring it out of himself. And that's why he lost those 2 fights, because, like, they were fighting at a higher pace than him. He was just kind of keeping up. Doucette is a judoka who's learning to be a kickboxer at City Kickboxing and is doing a pretty good job of it. Still very raw. There's some shakiness there, but, like, he's got good reach. He's got good range. He's got a good jab. He's got can mix in some kicks. He's got pretty good range feels, and Gooden doesn't consistently just break the fight. So it's kind of disappointing. He's a good athlete, but I just think that his style has a fundamental ceiling, and that ceiling is the UFC. Doucette minus 210 to minus 235. Gooden plus 175 to plus 185. I have Doucette by decision. And in the opener, I again feel like I have to disclose this one. I always kind of overrate JJ Aldridge, and I underrate Veronica Hardy. And in the case of JJ Aldridge, I will generally overlook how physically limited she is, because I look at her and I'm like, I like the technical game. I like the volume boxing. I like the counters that she throws in sometimes. I like everything she does when she's being wrestled. It just sometimes doesn't work out because she doesn't have the horsepower. And then in Veronica Hardy's case, I think she's a good athlete. I just think that her game is incredibly grab bag and doesn't really make any sense. That leads me to picking against her a lot. And sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I'm right. She does have a sub 500 record in the UFC, so it's not like I'm horrendously wrong. But, like, I was like, I think Jamie Lynn Horst's going to win. And she didn't. I think I picked Juliana Miller, who I really do not like, to win. And that didn't work either. I know I picked Polyana Biana. But, like, yeah, there is also, like, her just losing to Bia Malecki and not really having a solution and getting, wrestled by Jillian Robertson. and losing to Andrea KGB Lee, who is the closest opponent she has in style to JJ Aldridge. They're not that similar, to be honest. But, like, they're both people who kind of do a little bit of everything pretty well and have decent technical games and have, like, some significant physical limitations that come up. And Aldridge should be able to keep this on the feet, I would hope. And she has way more sound technical boxing than Veronica Hardy does. That's my assumption. That's my thoughts. Veronica Hardy, though, is a massive nerd when it comes to the fight game. Maybe she makes a leap forward. Those seem like the type of people, the people that when they're talking to, like, Ariel Helwani or to another host of a podcast, that you get a palpable passion for the art to them. that those are the types that'll actually make a leap and like learn. But I've got Aldridge by decision. She's a plus 107 to plus 122 favorite or underdog. And Hardy's a minus 130 to minus 146 favorite. I don't understand that because I have to say this. Like, I get that I overlook Hardy, but like her best win realistically is Polyana Viana, who fights a weight class below her. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird. She also had like a lot of medical issues that, generally speaking, I think probably will shorten her career a little bit. Anyways, that's the fight card. Like I said, I'm looking forward to the undercard a lot. I'm not crazy about the main event. I'm not crazy about the co-main event, but hey, it's okay. I will not be watching this card live. I will be visiting my hometown and visiting some people there. So I will miss it. I will have to watch it on Sunday after the fact. So there is that. And I'll have my recap up probably Monday. My job does end on Friday, so I will be of the unemployed nature once again looking for more contract work. So if you got any, hook me up. Down below, you can find my links for social media, for my video game stuff, and of course the MMA simulator Discord server. That is a mouthful, and I encourage you to join because it's fun. There you go. I will see you after the fight, or you will hear from me after the fights, and I'm hoping that they're really quality. Every time I have like mixed thoughts on a card, honestly, every time there is a card, I am hoping for the best. I do want the best card possible.